Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service through a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. And it is Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. A lot of things to talk about. And as always, if you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide, you can go online to weather.gov. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left there. It's a point-and-click map where you can interact, find forecasts, watches, and warnings for anywhere in the country. So if you want to check up on family and friends to see what the weather's like in their particular location, you can do it here. There's also all kinds of other information as well. Well, looking at what we got coming up here, Juneau and Anchorage have set some precipitation records for the month of February, and I'll talk more about that. We had a new weather satellite launched today. And then a little teasing upcoming of some significant solar eclipses that'll be visible from the United States here in the next year or two. And then we do expect another series of North Pacific lows that will be moving across the Aleutians up into the Bering, as well as up into the western and central parts of the Gulf next week into mid-March. It's going to keep a rather active weather pattern going, and we expect warmer and wetter conditions, especially over the western and southern portions of the state as we go through next week. No warnings or advisories or watches at this time anywhere in the state, other than some small craft advisories for some of the marine areas and gale warnings for portions of the Aleutians and maybe the far end of the Alaska Peninsula. That's about it. Well, let's look at some precipitation records for February. Juneau smashed their all-time record there at 10.53 inches of liquid equivalent precipitation. That includes melted snow and any ice. Add that on top of the record precipitation they had in January, and so far this year, just January and February combined, they've had nearly 23 inches of liquid equivalent precipitation, which surpasses their 3-month record that would include January, February, and March. And here we are, not even into like the first day of March. So that will be an interesting number to see what they have coming up here as the weather pattern gets more active. Now in Anchorage, not that much for February, but February ended up being the second wettest on record for the Anchorage area at 2.76 inches of liquid equivalent precipitation. And this is looking back on records that go as far back as nearly 70 years prior to statehood, so that's still notable. And as I mentioned yesterday, today was the launch for the GOES-T satellite that'll be renamed GOES-18 once it becomes fully deployed by NASA. And it's a very important weather satellite. It services the western U.S. as well as all the way up into the Alaska region. And why this is important is because GOES-17 had a problem with one of its imagers. It developed about 4 years ago, or shortly after launch. And so this is going to help fix that problem, and it's going to give us a few other added bonuses. So this is really good news for those of us in the forecasting business, as well as the information we can help provide you when it comes to forecast, watches, and warnings. Another little thing I want to tease, we have some upcoming significant solar eclipses here. The first one being on October 14th of 2023, an annular solar eclipse. That's when the moon doesn't completely cover the sun, so it kind of appears as this ring. That's going to ride across southwest Oregon, northern Nevada, down into New Mexico and southwest Texas. That'll be an interesting sight, but the big one is the total solar eclipse of April 8th, 2014. That one is when the moon blocks out the sun entirely, and it's a total solar eclipse. It'll start from Texas and work its way up through the Ohio Valley, eastern Great Lakes, all the way up to northern New England. So that's one worth seeing if you have an opportunity to travel into that part of the U.S. In 2024. Well, looking at the satellite imagery, we still have some lingering cloud cover. Few breaks this morning created areas of dense fog in the Panhandle. Don't expect a repeat of that come Wednesday morning, but still potential for some patchy fog. We still have a little area of light snow lingering up there along the northwest coast, up toward the western side of the Brooks Range. That'll be having a tendency to weaken. Weak high pressure along the Alcan border, Yukon Flats area will persist. And then we have a couple areas of low pressure that'll be working their way on up through the central and far western Aleutians. As we go into later tonight, early on Wednesday morning, we'll have a low north of the central Aleutians, another little sort of what we call triple point low forming just south of the Alaska Peninsula, lifting northward. And that will have a tendency to spread some more light snow up along portions of the southwest coast, areas of rain up there toward Kodiak Island with the exception of the high elevations. But by the time we get into Thursday, there will be a stronger low emerging from the North Pacific. It will deepen probably somewhere down into the 960s millibars as it crosses the eastern Aleutians, and it has the potential to produce storm force winds. There'll also be another surge of moisture in the warmer air. It'll be rain, but on the north side of the system, along and north of the frontal system, be in the form of some snow as it arrives along the southwest coast, lower Kuskokwim Delta. That could lead to some winter either type advisories or warnings, and then also factoring in the high winds could also impact parts of the eastern Aleutians and up into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Low temperatures for Wednesday morning will generally stop just above freezing on the outer coast there of the Panhandle, especially in the south and western areas. Toward south central, we expect lows to dip into the 20s, Anchorage on up toward Talkeetna, as well as, Cordova. And then as we go into Wednesday afternoon, we do expect temperatures to get above freezing in many areas. In fact, lower 40s in parts of the Panhandle, near 40 there at Homer, as well as Kodiak. And then Thursday morning, we're looking for lows to be generally around or a bit above freezing as you extend down along from Homer southwestward, as well as the southern part of the Panhandle. And then you can see that push of milder air coming in with that frontal system. By Thursday afternoon, we expect lower 40s up there toward, say, King Salmon and Kodiak. Also there again at the south end of the Panhandle at Ketchikan and Craig. Up across the far north, temperatures have, instead of being in the 20s and 30s below like we were looking at a week or two ago, they're now in the single digits below zero, and daytime highs are going to begin creeping upward into the 20s, Fairbanks westward toward Norton Sound. Lows Thursday morning could still be a bit below zero, generally say single digits to 10 below there, Yukon Flats up along the Arctic coast. But then Thursday afternoon, we see that milder air creeping up the lower Yukon Valley. As you get down toward McGrath, Eamonnok should have temperatures up around freezing. And as we extend out along the southwestern portions of the state, we see that milder air working its way up along the eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula with highs getting above freezing. That's temperatures Wednesday morning will be near or above freezing. And then look, by Wednesday afternoon, we expect highs upper 30s, lower 40s, and that milder air will begin to push up into the lower Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay areas. Thursday morning lows, don't look for temperatures to fall. If anything, steady to slowly rising there, especially along the southwest coast and pushing inland. And then on Thursday afternoon, we expect temperatures to get above freezing across much of the southwest on the west side of the Alaska Range, with certainly some 40s expected there from Kodiak Island southwestward down toward the eastern Aleutians. And looking at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and this is for March 7th through the 11th, that includes next week, we are expecting temperatures to average above to even much above normal, especially centered on southwest Alaska. That would include the areas around Dillingham up near Bethel. We could see some temperatures at times that get up above 40 degrees potentially, and that milder air will continue to spread north and eastward across the interior, especially going up along the Yukon River. As far as precipitation, as I mentioned, we're going to see a series of North Pacific lows lifting out of the North Pacific across the Aleutians or at times up through the western half of the Gulf. And that's going to bring in milder air. Milder air has more moisture, so that's going to increase the likelihood, at least a bit of a chance of above normal precipitation, especially centered on southwest Alaska. And areas further east, perhaps the Panhandle will get a little break and see a little below normal precipitation, especially the southern half of the Panhandle as we approach the middle part of March.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
It's now time for aviation weather. And if you have a flight planned for this midweek, Wednesday and Thursday, Main weather features: weak area of high pressure out over the upper Yukon Valley along the Alcan border. Yukon Flats area will persist into Thursday. This is a rather weak feature. We'll also see weak low pressure in the central Gulf, not of much consequence, but keep some areas of IFR going in the Panhandle. More importantly, we have already a couple areas of low pressure. On Wednesday, one will be lifting northwestward along the southwest coast, another out into the central Bering, but more importantly, by Thursday, a deepening low pressure system will be working its way across the eastern half of the Aleutians and through the tip of the Alaska Peninsula on up into the Bering Sea. And this will be the stronger low. It's going to have central pressure down into the 960s millibars. And looking at Wednesday afternoon, we see more widespread IFR conditions off the coast there of the Kenai through Kodiak Island, the areas of Bristol Bay, and just off the southwest coast, including Nunavik Island, all the way up to St. Lawrence and covering much of the central and western Bering. For Thursday morning, we continue to see kind of IFR conditions there along the southwest coast on up toward St. Lawrence, also an area around Prince William Sound out into the central Gulf of Alaska, and then hints of IFR conditions coming up there toward the central eastern Aleutians. And then by Thursday, as that low lifts up through the eastern Aleutians, we see more widespread IFR conditions Thursday morning from the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula up along the west coast all the way to the Bering Strait. Still a pocket of IFR conditions, though, out over the central Gulf with a little better conditions there across the mid and upper Yukon River to the Alcan border. And checking past conditions, Anaktuvuk Pass there in the north on Wednesday, we'll see VFR conditions become MVFR. That'll also be the case at Adigan Pass, VFR conditions becoming MVFR. Further south and west along the west side of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill will generally hold on to MVFR conditions on Wednesday. As we round up toward the north and west, Rainy Pass, MVFR, as will Windy Pass through the central Alaska Range, and a little further east, Isabel. We'll see MVFR conditions generally hold on Wednesday as well. And Mentasta may see visual flight rules there in the morning becoming MVFR. Further south and west, Tanita should generally see MVFR conditions becoming VFR during the day on Wednesday. And then further south and west there at Portage Pass, generally MVFR conditions are expected to hold. And in the north end of the Panhandle, Chilkoot and White should generally see IFR conditions persist there. There have been some areas of fog, at least as of this Tuesday morning, so similar conditions could be causing some influences there as well on Wednesday. Wednesday morning, the freezing level at the surface is running along the northern Gulf Coast in through the interior coastal mountains there of the Panhandle, and then back out to near the south end of Kodiak Island across the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, back up into the lower central portion of the Bering Sea. And the greatest threat for any icing is going to be along portions of the Alaska Peninsula, particularly the Pacific side, south side of Kodiak Island between 5,000 and 12,000 feet. And then another area with a low pressure system there out over at least portions of the central Aleutians between 3,000 and 10,000 feet up into the lower central portion of the Bering Sea. Far northwest, isolated moderate icing possible, lower Chukchi Sea, northwest coast 2,000 to 10,000 feet, and then a few pockets 5,000 to 12,000 feet in the Panhandle. Upper level jet stream, we have a ridge nudging up into the Gulf of Alaska. Otherwise, no really impressive type of jet pattern at 30,000 feet. As we come down, though, to the mid-levels, around 9,000 feet, we do have a low-pressure circulation out there north of the central Aleutians in the lower portion of the Bering, and a broad area of southwest winds overspreading Cook Inlet down toward Kodiak Island and then extending back out there in through the eastern half of the Aleutians and bringing it down to 3,000 feet. We see the one low there on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula around Bristol Bay, lower Kuskokwim area, with some winds as high as 60 knots from the southeast there up through the lower portion of Cook Inlet at the entrance across the southwest, and also an area north of the central Aleutians between 45 and 55 knots. As a result, the greatest threat for turbulence, considerable moderate turbulence, will be over southwest Alaska, including the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Wednesday, surface to 4,000 feet. And then an area out from the eastern and central Aleutians between the surface and 3,000 feet.
Hello, I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite orbiting 22,000 miles above Earth. I can see a lot of cool stuff from up here, and I take pictures of it with my spiffy camera that has 16 different settings. I have such good eyesight, I can see clouds, snow, smoke, smog, and ash, so I can warn you about dangerous conditions and help you avoid them. When storms are brewing, I watch them closely and help with hurricane, tornado, and flood warnings to help keep you safe. And my lightning mapper tracks lightning strikes way up in the sky, even through dark, dense clouds. I also help with search and rescue missions. I listen for distress signals from emergency beacons and tell search and rescue teams just where to find people who need help. But even when I'm keeping a close eye on Earth, I'm monitoring weather out here in space, too. I watch the sun for big bursts of energy, which send waves of radiation toward Earth that can affect power grids, block communication with planes, cause errors in GPS, and damage satellites. Space weather is also very dangerous for astronauts working outside the International Space Station. I warn them so they can get inside where they'll be safe. So the next time you watch a weather report or check your phone for the forecast, remember, that's me. So look to the sky and wave. I'll be here. Whoa! Things are looking pretty bad down there. But don't worry. I'm going to give weather forecasters a heads up and help you stay safe. I'm a GOES-R series weather satellite, and one of my jobs is to keep an eye on Earth's weather as I orbit above. But I'm 22,000 miles above Earth. How does your local weather forecaster know what I see all the way up here? First, I have to figure out what's going on. I point my special camera at the Earth and take pictures of the clouds I see below. My pictures show where the clouds are, but I also take lots of other notes about the clouds. For example, how high they reach into the atmosphere, how much rain they might cause, and when a severe storm may be forming. But I can't keep all of this information to myself. I have to share it with weather forecasters down on Earth. A big antenna is waiting for my call. Since I'm a satellite, I send my pictures and notes in a computer language of ones and zeros. Luckily, the antenna speaks my language. Computers connected to the antenna organize my notes and combine all of the pictures and cloud information and translate them into weather maps. They send a version of the maps back up to me. I'll hold on to these for later. Another copy of the maps is split into smaller pieces. This helps the maps move faster from one place to another. The map pieces are then sent for processing before being sent back up in the sky to a communication satellite. From there, the maps are picked up by antennas at the National Weather Service forecast offices in each region. There are more than 100 offices. I also take the maps that I received and send them out to companies that specialize in making the maps more colorful and better for viewing on TVs and computers. The colorful maps and the maps from the forecast offices then go to your local weather forecaster. The forecaster combines the information from these maps with lots of other information, like model forecast data and radar data, to make predictions about the upcoming weather in your area. And that's how I help you find out if bad weather is going to ruin your afternoon plans. You're welcome. Soon it will be my time to shine. In outer space. I'm the GOES-R satellite. That stands for Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. And the R stands for my order in this series of weather satellites. Like my older siblings before me, I'll do a lot for watching weather, but I'm pretty special because I have a lot of new gadgets. I'm originally from Colorado, but my journey to space has a few stops along the way. I'll be shipped in a very special satellite shipping container to Kennedy Space Center. Moving me around is not easy. I'm over 18 feet wide and weigh 6,000 pounds. And then things get really exciting. I get loaded onto an Atlas V541 launch vehicle. A big rocket! Woo! After Atlas and I blast off together, my compartment separates from the launch vehicle and I continue to climb higher and higher. Then I break away completely and unfurl my solar panel and antenna. After that, I have to use my thrusters to get into just the right position, 22,000 miles above the ground and traveling 1.9 miles per second to keep up with Earth's rotation. And then I can officially start my job along with my fellow GOES sisters, where I take advanced pictures for more accurate weather forecasts, map lightning in real time, and improve the monitoring of the sun's activity. It's going to be so awesome! I can't wait!
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, in our final marine segment of the show, we start with the sea ice edge, and we're going to look along the Arctic coast, the Chukchi Sea, and we see a few areas where the ice has tried to open up a little bit, but overall the ice is going to be able to reform a bit just because some colder air is lingering up through these regions, and we expect that. Further south and west, though, as we go along the western and southern coast, we see more in the way of ice that has broken open. Polynias have formed, and we expect, at least initially with some easterly flow, the ice is going to want to at least move westward. But there also will tend to be more of a northerly retreat as we develop south-southwest winds, especially along and south of the ice edge, with a couple of frontal systems that will eventually be pushing into the southwest coast and mainland as we head through later in the weekend and next week. In the meantime, across the southeast panhandle, the inner channels, variable winds 5 to 15 knots, waves generally a couple of feet. Along the outer coast of the Gulf, 15 to 20 knot winds, Gustavus southward from the northwest, and we expect waves of 7 to maybe 9 feet. More westerly winds, Yakutat westward with waves of 5 feet. On Thursday, winds will continue rather light across the inner channels, mainly north 10 knots, Petersburg on up through Lynn Canal, 5 knots and variable Ketchikan, Metlakatla. Along the outer coast, winds will be south-southeast 20 to 25 knots, waves generally 6 to 9 feet. And then across the northwestern Gulf, strongest winds on Wednesday will be at the entrance of Cook Inlet from the southeast to east around 35 knots. Prince William Sound east winds 15 knots, waves a few feet. And on Thursday, look for winds over Prince William Sound to be easterly around 20 knots with waves to 4 feet. Northeasterly winds 20 knots along the upper 2/3 of the Cook Inlet, but kind of more of a southerly wind there at the entrance at 20 knots, waves maybe 4 feet, and then winds 30 knots off the Kenai with waves, once you get out well into the open waters, as high as 10, 12 feet. Across the Kodiak Island and northern portion of the Alaska Peninsula, winds will be southeast to easterly 30 to 35 knots, waves 10 to 13 feet on the North Pacific side, trying to turn more southwesterly as you get down towards Sand Point and north of Cold Bay on the Bering side. And then on Thursday, we will have an area of low pressure passing through the eastern Aleutians, and ahead of it we could see 45 knot gales there across at least the southwestern half of the Alaska Peninsula, waves building to around 20 feet off of Sand Point and south of False Pass there on the North Pacific side. Could be some stronger storm force gusts. Stay tuned. And then across the Aleutian chain, Wednesday we have the one low that's up there in the central Aleutians, I should say central Bering north of the Aleutians. And once we get west of Nikolsky, especially the central Aleutians and western Aleutians, we're looking at 35 to 40 knots southwest to west gales, and waves in those areas generally around or a bit over 20 feet. By Thursday, another strong low is going to be lifting up across the eastern Aleutians. And around this more compact low, we expect at the very least gale force winds upwards to 45 knots. As I said, there could be some storm force gusts, and waves will be running a bit over 20 feet there south of Nikolsky and on Alaska. Lesser wind from the west, 25 knots there, AKwx westward, with waves generally around 10 to 12 feet. Looking at the ice there across the northern Bering, winds will be out of the east 15 to 20 knots, as high as 30 knots along the ice edge, so that will support a westward drift of the ice edge. And as we go into Thursday, winds continue east-southeast, generally 20 to 25 knots over the ice, but 30 to 35 knots once you start getting into open water toward St. Paul and St. George, with waves of 8 to 12 feet. Along the Arctic coast, winds will generally be out of the south 10 to 15 knots, a little more onshore variable there, northwest coast, and offshore northeast to east winds out of Kotzebue Sound, 10 knots in the lower Chukchi Sea, picking up to 25 knots on the west side of the Seward Peninsula, north of Nunavik Island. And then on Thursday, we're looking for 10 to 15 knot winds along the Arctic coast. They turn a little more to the northeast and east, going down through the lower Chukchi Sea from south of Wainwright down through Cape Lisburne and Kivalina. And then easterly off the west side of the Seward Peninsula, 25 knots north side of St. Lawrence Island. A quick check as we go through tonight. Low pressures out over the lower Bering will continue to lift northward on Wednesday, with a stronger low arriving Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.